What I'm going to be showing you today is a repair for a 2003 to 2007 Honda Accord throttle body. The reason I'm making this repair is because I don't have cruise control. To explain why that is, first I want to show you how the throttle body works. So the throttle body has two cables that attach to the side of it. The first cable attaches to this metal ring right here and pulls the throttle open with the accelerator pedal. The second cable attaches to this black inner throttle cable connection and will pull the throttle cable open using the cruise control actuator. Both of these hit the same point up here, which controls the throttle, and there's springs to return them all to the fully closed position when no pressure is being applied. The problem I have with my throttle body is that that black inner throttle cable connection broke off. So now the cruise control actuator can no longer pull this ring to be able to open the throttle plate, which means that when I turn cruise control on and take my foot off the gas, I coast down as if I didn't have cruise control turned on at all. My goal to fix this is actually to transfer these two pieces, these two throttle connections off of this second throttle body onto my original throttle body. The reason I'm not just switching the whole throttle body is because the electronics, the idle air control, and my throttle position sensor are actually broken on the throttle body I got from the junkyard. But since it has good cable connections, I'm going to go ahead and take this apart and just transfer them over to my electronically functioning throttle body. This repair is actually incredibly easy to do and only requires the use of one tool. Now, Honda didn't want to make things too easy because they want you to have to buy the whole throttle body, even though all you need to replace is this piece. Honda actually does not recommend you taking this nut off and removing anything from the throttle body. They actually recommend replacing the entire throttle body, which is a rather expensive repair. I was able to get this throttle body from a junkyard for under $100. To be able to get a throttle body from Honda would have been in excess of $500. So I didn't want to do that for a vehicle that's about 20 years old. So to be able to get this off, you need an 11mm wrench or socket, and then you go on here and just take this and turn it off. Now when you do that, it's going to want to open the throttle plate. That's perfectly fine. Let it go back against the stop. Push down with a decent amount of pressure, and you'll start feeling that pop loose. Now once it gets loose, bring that throttle plate back closed. Make sure to watch your fingers so you don't crush them underneath. And then you can loosen it almost the rest of the way by hand, actually. So I can just take this and turn it right off as long as it's not too rusty, depending on where you live. And there we go. So I'm going to take these parts, and as I take them off, I'm going to put them down in the order of which they came off the throttle body. This is incredibly important because it's easy to get confused on what part goes back in what order. So the first thing that came off was that nut. The next one is going to be a lock washer in here. So I'll put that down right next to it. Then there is a plastic spacer that this slides on. This plastic spacer also has a metal washer inside of it. Be careful not to lose that. So there's a metal washer sitting right there. I'm going to take and put that back down. Then after that, this piece right here is going to want to slide off. Now there is a spring behind it that puts a little bit of preload on it, so it may want to pop off on you as soon as you get the nut loose. That's why I said make sure not to lose any pieces. I'm trying to list them all out here so you can see them. When I take this off, it's going to want to spin back to its home position. That's the preload it puts on there so your pedal feels nice and firm when you press it. So I pull this off, throw this piece right here. That spring that's behind it is actually tied into the throttle body, so it doesn't come off very easily. If you see when I wiggle it, it's actually wiggling this other side of the spring up here. Don't worry about that one yet. The next piece that's going to come off is this spring sitting right there. Now to be able to get this off, it is hooked onto the top of the throttle body. So I can just take my finger, push it back, slip it off right there, and then as I slip it off, I'm going to go ahead and pull this spring forward to get the tension off of it. It may want to snap on you, that's okay, just try not to bend it too much. You take this and slide it off, and now this is my bad piece. This is the piece that I wanted to replace because I cannot get the throttle cable to mount to this anymore. So this spring is reusable if you slide it out of here. I'm just gonna take the spring off of my Junkyard throttle body and transfer it over with it. But here you go, that's all that there is. That's all that has to come off to be able to replace these pieces. Now all I have to do is the same process on the other throttle body, and then I'll be ready to transfer the parts over. Everything else that's on here, I shouldn't have to touch or do anything with. All that stuff is fine. This is how the throttle body works normally, none of the extra stuff. So I'll put that throttle off to the side, and I'm gonna do the same thing with this one over here. Take that 11mm, pop this loose, let it bring it all the way to where the throttle's open, and I can even hold it there. Pop that nut loose, bring the throttle back to its home position, to its closed position, and then I can take that nut off. And here I can do the same thing. I'm gonna go ahead and put these all out in order. So that nut, the lock washer, the washer and the plastic retainer, this comes off again. It wants to spin out to that position, slide it off. That spring, once again, doesn't come out. Take this spring here, rotate it off the anchor point, let it spring itself around a little bit, and then slide this piece off. And this is my good piece. This is what I'm gonna go ahead and put on my factory throttle body to be able to get this thing to work again. So there's everything for disassembly. Now we're gonna go ahead and put these nice, clean, working functional pieces onto my original throttle body. So the way that this is gonna work, pretty much an exact reverse of disassembly. I'm gonna take this first piece and slide it into place. Make sure that I put this end right here, that finger that actually pulls the throttle body open. Make sure that I line that up properly. My spring fell out, so I gotta make sure it goes back into place. And I wanna press down on this a bit, and I wanna give it that half a turn of spring tension that it had before. And give it that half a turn of spring tension it had before, and secure it back to the anchor point. If you look, my spring fell out of my retainer here. I'm just gonna bring it and push it back down underneath. Now that's reassembled. I can test it if I want to, make sure that it feels nice and springy and comes back. I can pull this part of the throttle down, then pull this part down. Yep, the spring works, everything feels good, everything feels smooth. Make sure it's pushed and fully seated all the way down, especially if you happen to test it. Now I can take this piece right here, my throttle actuator that's tied to my accelerator pedal, and put it back on. Set this down for a second to show you there's a little hole right here on the front. That little hole on the front has to have this spring go through it. So I take this, throw it on, so the spring comes through that hole right there, and I'm gonna do the same thing. I gotta give it that half a turn, but this is a half a turn in the opposite direction because I'm tightening this spring the other way, and it sits, whoops, came right out, but it sits right in here. Now you're probably gonna have to hold this in place because all it wants to do is pop back out now that it's loose. Now I'm gonna take my plastic retainer and my washer, put it back on, take the lock washer, put it back on, make sure everything is fully seated, and it all looks about right to me. And then I'm gonna go ahead and take the nut and thread the nut back on. Now obviously my nut's not threading into place, which means that I am not fully seated, so I'm gonna take these back off. And I'm gonna try and figure out why that is. I'm not falling into place all the way with where I need to be. And actually what happened was I was fully seated. There's a small collar inside of here, which you may or may not be able to see. But that small collar, I have to push it back down into the throttle body to expose my threads. If I don't do that, I can't get the nut to thread on. Now keep in mind while I'm doing this, I'm pushing down on this plate right here so that way it doesn't spring loose. So once again, reverse a disassembly, the plastic washer and then the metal washer that's on the inside. Lock washer goes back over the top. And then my nut sits on top of that. Give it a couple of turns by hand here. And then bring it down the rest of the way with the ratchet. Should be easy to turn it first, just like it is for me right now. It's helping me line everything back up. And then when it starts to get tight, you'll see there's some paint here from where it was originally painted. When they tightened it, they do that for warranty purposes to make sure that nobody messes with it. So that way if something does fail on it, they can see if you touched it or not. So I'm going to bring this back down. I don't have a torque spec for this because Honda doesn't recommend servicing it. So I just try to match those paint marks up with where they were originally. And as long as everything works, and I have smooth operation of the throttle plate, smooth operation of my cruise control lever, and smooth operation of my accelerator pedal lever, I'm going to say that that's good. So now one thing I will recommend if you're going to go and put this right back on the car, there is a throttle body gasket under here that during this service I happen to have mauled up pretty good. So I am going to remove this and I'm going to make sure that I get a new one. These can be picked up pretty much any auto parts store. And then one other thing I want to make sure to mention, because this is all you have to do. I don't need to put these back together on the Junkyard throttle body because there's no purpose in doing that. I don't need this. I could do it just to keep the parts all together, keep this around for some spare parts and salvage material should I need anything else in the future, but I'm done with these. One thing I will tell you is you do not have to get a throttle body from a junkyard to get all of this. Dorman does make a parts kit for it. I'm going to try and find the part number for it, throw it into the description for you. So that way, if you don't want to go and get a junkyard throttle body, I just happen to have one, you can order all of these pieces as part of that Dorman kit and do this on your own throttle body, no problem. All in all, took me about 10 minutes total to do while explaining it to you guys. Simple enough, easy enough. I hope that this fixes at least one person's car out there.